to be with you today to be discussing something that I think many of us, and certainly the three of us, have thought about in different ways. What it means to be in solidarity and an internationalist. And of course, we know Dr. Kando has led a life of many different terms in many different spaces, and in a government career and academic career in many different spaces, has embodied the spirit of solidarity and has learned so much. And Sister Silvana, who is on the Flotilla at the moment, who is the South African delegation, has, and I'm going to tell you a personal story here, a personal moment. So Kiswa is the one who is always, no matter what, reminding us to connect struggle, reminding us that oppression is all connected, and so our struggle against it must all be in her writing, in her thinking, in her dreaming, in her sailing. So, without, I'm going to stop talking so much because it is my absolute honor to interview these incredible humans and then later to invite you to the stage. So just to kick us off, I wanted to just welcome you, Dr. Kando, and say I know this is your first Instagram Live.
Yay!
Yay!
I hope I won't regret it.
You have so many millennial and Gen Z fans from now. So let me start off by saying, first of all, how are you? How are you doing?
Well, let me thank you for inviting me to join this live feed today, and also to express my grateful thanks to all who are on the flotilla for their courage and commitment to this cause for freedom and justice for the people of Palestine. I think that all of the individuals who have joined the flotilla are a true expression of international solidarity and a commitment to using solidarity to help to secure the freedom of others. I am very concerned about the dangers that you're confronted with, but I believe that your courage is an example to the world, and I'm hoping that you will be able to succeed in your mission, and that you will inspire thousands of others to join you in this very heroic and important work.
What a wonderful way to start. Thank you. Thank you for that. And so then let me take these beautiful, poignant words and turn to our courageous, heroic comrade who is on the boat and tell us a little bit why, there's so many ways that you have been in solidarity on the ground at protests in your writing. What was it that made you decide to take this step and do this really important work to break the siege?
Thank you for that, Joe. I think, heroic is a little bit of an overstatement. The heroes are the people of Palestine, in Palestine, who are constantly surviving against very difficult odds. So they are the true heroes. The children of Gaza who have somehow managed to be there in spite of everything that's happening. But what led me to take part in the Global Samud Flotilla, together with a whole bunch of other people, and this is a conversation that I've heard so many times with a lot of people, is really we've gone on protests, we'd signed papers, we had signed petitions, we have done what we can, and we noticed that there isn't any movement from governments. So as civil society, as civilians, I as a writer, we all decided that maybe this is our chance. Let's do something. Maybe this will push our governments to do something. If the governments won't do something, maybe we will do it as civilians. And I think that is really what has led many of us to be here and to undertake this. And of course, the other thing was this was particularly big because there are a lot more countries than previously, and there are a lot more boards than previously. So we're hoping with that we can actually break the siege.
I must say, I myself am feeling, even against these terrible odds, which I do want to get to, extremely hopeful. And what you say about governments, I think is a really, I was thinking about it last night, catching up on what's going on at the General Assembly at the United Nations, where we have seen some really important steps being taken by some states to really say, we are recognizing this as a genocide, and we are taking action. And I can't help but think that much of this is inspired and motivated, in part at least, by the work of those in the flotilla. So I think that's an important thing. I want to come back to a point that you've made there, Zukiswa, about the heroes being in Gaza. And I want to think, so I want to say you both have done so many things that I don't want to focus on one, but let us talk about, Dr. Pando, this moment of taking Israel to the ICJ, and this moment of doing this, you taking the boat to Palestine. I think of these as, and specifically when I wanted to speak to you together, was to think of these, there's so many little moments of revolutionary solidarity, but these are quite big things. And I wanted to ask you both to reflect on these journeys of different types, in relation to the question of an internationalism that exceeds our borders, both in the imagination, but also quite physically. So I wonder if I could start with Dr. Pandora on that one.
Well, I want to reiterate to Zukiswa that it is heroic. It's very brave and courageous, the step that you've taken. And she is right. There has been a great deal of action in our country, protests. Civil society has been consistent in its responses. And so that is, I think, significant and should not be neglected. But I do think what Zukiswa is reflecting is what we experienced in the struggle against apartheid. Many will recall that when we were seeking international solidarity, it was governments that rejected, and civil society stood with the liberation movements. And so it is always in history, in struggle, that the role of civil society is particularly important. And this is why the flotilla is going to stand out as a significant contribution to the struggle that is underway. I also think that going to the ICJ was important because South Africa's government decided to test international law and to lift it out from the shadows and place Israel before the court of international public opinion. Nothing could be hidden. Many people were almost pretending that a genocide was not underway, that the massive killing we were seeing could be justified in some way. But once we got to the detail of the submissions at the International Court of Justice, suddenly the world was alert, point by point, what constitutes genocide and how the state of Israel and leaders act in concert with all that we define as genocidal. So it was an important moment, but the flotilla in itself is a significant response and action to advance the struggle. Struggle has many different forms that it assumes over time. And I think what we are seeing in a very short period is a set of actions that I believe are moving toward creating a momentum that will take us to another stage of working to secure freedom and sovereignty for the people people of Palestine. Of course, we are devastated by the daily murder, by the treachery on innocent civilians. When they're told to move from one area to another, they're killed as they move. This all reflects what we've been saying for a very long time. But each of the steps that are being taken, in some, begin to lead us to a position where we will start to have discussion on what the outcome of a just and sovereign solution could be. And that will be when the Palestinian people themselves define their freedom. We are acting as a catalyst, all of us in our different actions, but the final outcome and framework will be and must be the decision of the Palestinian people. Nobody should impose on them.
I think that's such an important. I think that's such a powerful thing to end with. Can I just ask that when you're not speaking, you mute? Because we've got some pushback. Thank you. I think this idea of nothing about us without us, and this point you've made about the South African struggle is such an important one to remind us, and something we talk about a lot in South Africa. You know, how important that struggle from the ground was, and not just at the multilateral state level, and the support from civil society. Zukiswa, so I'm going to turn to you and ask you to reflect on this and to answer the same question about these big moments towards solidarity.
Listen, I think it's been really wonderful just to see what has been happening. You know, you were with me in Tunis before I got on the boat, and seeing the businesses shut down because people deliberately took boycotts, even if governments had allowed them to work in that place. So we've seen boycotts that have been amazing, and companies that are complicit in this genocide hurting where it most matters, in their wallets. We have seen people going to different places and campaigning for sanctions, campaigning on divestments in different companies. And this, I think, is something that we can't put down lightly. And of course, this particular moment, Joe, we also just recently saw, I don't think that we understand that Italy is sending the Navy to come and protect us, and so is Spain. I don't think this would have been possible without Italian civilians saying no and just going on a nationwide strike and, sitting at parliament and, it's really just been admirable. And of course, we've seen President Gustavo Petro of Colombia. He already sent a message of support before we even got on the boats for this flotilla. He gave a blessing for it. And we've seen his brilliant and beautiful speech at the Nations saying more needs to be done. So it has been really like almost kind of like the people acted, the people spoke up. So while on this flotilla, we are just hundreds and we've got tens and tens and tens of boats, I keep saying that hundreds of millions and billions who are actually the wind beneath our sails. And it's been constant, the love that has been coming constantly from everybody, from home in South Africa, but across the globe. It's just, I don't think that it would have been possible without the whole globe acting in unison, and also realizing that we're at a very pivotal moment as the globe, where if we allow this to happen, if this continues to happen, well, we did allow it, but if this continues to happen, we will never be able to live with ourselves. This is a historic moment that if we allow it, things are going to be very different thereafter. And it's either we set ourselves right as the world and we become a kinder and more humane world, or we fall down the precipice.
But I'm back. I love that answer from both of you. Thank you. And so let me push this a little bit further, because I think both framed in different ways. Is that there are, I think what I'm getting is a diversity of tactics. So we test the law, we boycott, we push for sanctions, we work at the United Nations, we have public protests, we have strikes, and these all come together in different spheres to push for justice, for liberation, freedom, and then coming back to Dr. Pando's, ultimately geared towards a point where there is Palestinian liberation and we work in concert with what Palestinians are telling us they want. So I think I want to ask, because this is something we get asked a lot, so for people who are at home, who are watching this on their Instagram, what kinds of things do you think? We're pushing states at the moment, we're saying end the genocide. We've had South Africa's ICJ case, we've had Al-Haq, we've had every human rights organization, we've had the UN Commission now last week, the week before. It's a genocide, it's your responsibility under Genocide Convention. We knew this in January 2024. But let's say an ordinary person who's watching, and we're all ordinary people, but who is watching on Instagram, what are sort of 2 or 3 things that you can think of that they could be doing to kind of respond to the call to escalate our solidarity and internationalism?
I
Both
think
of you have
Zukiswa
to
should
answer
kick
this
off.
question.
The young
Boycott.
lion.
Boycott Cape Union Mart, boycott McDonald's, boycott Discount. There are a whole bunch of companies that are complicit in the genocide. They are funding it. They are giving money to the Israeli occupation forces. So boycott. Coca-Cola, etc. There are a bunch of organizers, there's a list on the BDS list. So just take a look at the BDS list and see what to boycott. But also turn up for protests sometimes, because those numbers count to government if there's a particular policy position you'd like to be pushed. Turn up for protests if you can.
I agree. Continue the protest, very important, but also petition. I think write letters and communicate. There's a lot of dishonesty, disinformation out there. We need to challenge it. So we shouldn't leave radio shows to talk absolute lies about what is happening in Gaza, pretending that there aren't murderous onslaughts there. So communicate, provide information. If you can develop a very simple information tool, a single page pamphlet, do so, share with your neighborhood, inform everyone about what is happening, particularly in our religious institutions, because that's often where the lies are being told. Then the second thing is that boycott and sanctions were very important for South Africa against apartheid in the international solidarity campaign. We need to intensify this. We do have a dilemma because our trade unions globally have been weakened over time. They've been made very administrative and bureaucratic. And we're absolutely thrilled at the workers in Italy who have taken a stand, because economic benefit is the oxygen for apartheid Israel. And so what we've got to do is make the economic side bite. And this is where looking very carefully at what you buy, whenever you're in the store, just check where those goods come from. And if you know that they're part of the money armor of apartheid Israel, do not purchase them. And then in countries where politics are being funded with money that causes the country to support the evil state of apartheid of Israel, watch your politicians, check where they're getting money, and don't vote for them if they're accepting money to promote genocide. So let us not, as civil society, pretend that as human beings, we don't have social agency. There's nothing that we can do. we can use the momentum that has been built over the 2 years to much greater effect. And each one of us can have an impact.
Thank you. This is so great. And I think what I really like about the way you frame this back and forth is that it is at once, I think, an economic strangulation and a narrative refusal. And that's really important. And I think when we look at our artists as well, are part of that narrative package. And I just want to pick up on one comment that I saw as you were talking in the feed here, where someone said, "Talk to your families." And I think just coming back to Dr. Pando's point about this big social agency and human ability to make small changes, I think it's Tony Cade Bambara who says, you know, it's very easy to be out on the streets telling people what to do, but if you can't get your own house in order, what are you doing? And I think that's really important, you know, where we talk about religious institutions and also in your spaces of family. But coming from there, I want to slightly change directions a little bit to something that I know a lot of people are thinking about around these awful acts of what seems to me to be a structure of impunity in terms of the drone attacks and psychological warfare and terror on the Flotilla vessels. We saw, not last night, the night before, we've seen surveillance constantly. We saw the 2 attacks in Tunisian water 2 nights ago in international waters. We know this is a violation of the law, of international humanitarian law, of international maritime law. We know it might be a way of trying to extend the siege into international waters, into Tunisian waters. And I think I just want to link this here to this point that Dr. Pando made about the narrative, is that one of the things that always often in the way that Israel has attacked and carried out the genocide in Palestine and the diaspora is, first you call people terrorists, then you call people Hamas, then you provide a justification to attack because you've unhumaned or dehumanized, racialized people, and then you give yourself the space to be able to justify attacks. And we've seen this throughout colonial history. We've seen it in Congo, we've seen it in space apartheid, anti-blackness, racism, Islamophobia. So I wanted to kind of bring this in and ask Sukiswa how you were in the ocean at the time of these attacks. How was that for you? What are your feelings? I spoke to you the next morning and you were much more calm than I was. I was having a lot of Jewish angst. You were very calm, despite, which I think speaks to your steadfastness and to Samud. So can you speak us through a little bit about what that was like?
You know, I actually did a post on it today that just came out as I'm doing my journals, but I wrote it on Tuesday night. And, you know, I was chatting to to the participants on my boat, and I said, you know, remember what happened in Tunis when there was that attack on the boats? When that attack on the boats happened, all that made us feel like was we needed to get on the boat immediately because you are using us as a distraction while you continue killing Palestinians in Gaza, you know, and you are hoping that we either cancel so that you can continue your killings or you delay so that by the time we get there, Gaza will be obliterated. And we refuse that. We refuse to be complicit in that. We refuse to dance to your tune, you know. And so when I asked everybody, the participants on the spot, and I said to them, how are you guys feeling, you know, after this? Everybody was like, you know what? Yes, let's go. This is it, you know, and everybody was very excited about it. But what was even more interesting is when the news came about Italy escorting us, somebody on the board said, well, when they get there, they shouldn't just leave. Maybe they should wait so that we help the Gazans to clear up the rubble and rebuild their Gaza, you know? And that to me has been the spirit of the world. It has shown me that, you know, I think a lot of times when you go to protest, you think you're alone, or when you write on Instagram, or on Facebook, on social media, you think you're alone who's seeing this, or it's you and your 5 friends. And then you realize the world is actually a really kind.
Have we lost Ukizwa? Can you hear her? No? Crucial moment. I'm sure she'll
I
come
think she'll
back.
come. Yeah.
I'm sure she'll come back. In the meantime, Dr. Pando, can I ask you to, I mean, it's such a moment there to, you know, from your sharp and acute perspective on this, your take on these horrendous drone attacks in the context of this ongoing bombardment, and what seems like a final solution, which we cannot let happen, but in Gaza at the moment.
Well, for many, many months, Israel has been denying that they are complicit in genocide and are actually committing genocide. But the world has now seen, it's now very clear. We all know the truth. And we know that a large part of the reason for the murders that they've committed lies in the impunity that they've enjoyed for so many years. And the fact that many people would not stand up and challenge them. Now we have a global movement underway. The world has recognized that something terrible is happening and that humanity must stand up. Otherwise, we are opening an open sesame for all evil to just enjoy wide reign. And I am so, so thrilled that, in particular, young people all over the world have decided that they will stand up for the good, that they'll stand up for international law, for human rights, and that they will say, not in our name. I think we are seeing a real change in how the world perceives the interests of others who are vulnerable to the harm that the Palestinian people have faced for so many decades. So this has been an awakening. And we know that as Israel observes the tide turning, the Israeli apartheid state will become more vicious, just as we experienced in apartheid South Africa. During negotiations, we had boy pardon. So don't believe, as the world turns, that Israel will suddenly become, nervous. You'll see more viciousness, and so we have to have greater care, greater support, and really well done to Italy and Spain for stepping forward. We hope more countries will step forward because it is that protection around the flotilla, around the humanitarian cause that will say to Israel, the world is not going to continue to tolerate what you are doing. And it is at that point that we'll know we've reached the turning point. So as the world starts to stand up and as governments take on the responsibility to protect the innocent from harm, then we will know the world is changing. And Italy and Spain are showing the way, and the rest of the world must follow them.
Thank you. I think that's I'm not going to keep you for too much longer. I'm conscious of your time, but I think that what I really appreciate and want to really emphasize to our viewers is this point that you've made, because I think sometimes when you're inside your own perspective and you're doing your activism and you're participating in the boycott, and it feels like it's getting worse, and maybe it is and maybe it isn't, but I think this point and the boycotting moment is so integral because it is at this moment that it's darkest before the dawn, as it were. And just if I may, to say, I think the moment, and I will say I will confess to being a person who was quite disheartened by international law, who had to take an extra few months on my PhD dissertation because all my arguments fell flat because one very, very solidarist government decided to mess with my argument that it always creates impunity. So I'm grateful and slow. But I do want to say, I think that, as you're saying about Italy and Spain, I think very often the contributions of the global South and of Africa in particular are written out of history. And obviously you were not doing that to be written into history, you were doing that, and certainly can reflect that the role that South Africa has played in the struggle, and obviously we are waiting on sanctions legislation and the end of coal sales, but in terms of what the remarkable steps that South Africa took, and really just to say the framing of genocide, which can be quite narrow, in terms of a broader structure of apartheid, in terms of the ongoing Nakba, in terms of colonialism, changed the game. You can't, it's changed the way we are allowed to talk about things, even if we don't. Dr. Panna, I'm going to ask you one more question back to the folks that are watching, and to say, I've had some conversations, so I'm working with the legal unit, and I've had some conversations with people who, for the first time, are experiencing what I think people in Palestine experience on a daily basis. What you experience much of is this, all of a sudden being called, for example, a terrorist for delivering humanitarian aid, or all of a sudden having their workplace criticizing them, or whatever it is. And I wondered if you had, I think, that if you had any words of, because I think the goal of the colonizer and the Zionist entity is to suppress, to say we're going to call people who are delivering food terrorists, and we're going to call neonatal units terrorists, and then what does it mean? So I wondered if you had any words that people can reflect on that, and how they can think about it in terms of their activism.
Well, really, I think that all I can say in response to that is draw your example from Nelson Mandela. Nelson Mandela served in prison for over 25 years and came out of prison to help a nation rebuild itself, and did that with the greatest attention to national unity and to peace. So I think that what we should always learn is to draw the lessons from those who have been in struggle, because struggle is not new. Many people have suffered. There are many who have led struggles throughout the world, and we should draw on their lesson and their example. And remember that Nelson Mandela was called a terrorist by great leaders of the West, the most educated, the most rich in economic terms, and yet the least educated about struggle and anti-colonialism, labeled Nelson Mandela a terrorist for wanting freedom. So don't be surprised when you call for the people of Palestine to enjoy basic human rights, basic sovereignty, basic freedoms. Don't be surprised you are labeled anti-Semite. I'm accused of being a Hamas representative in South Africa. I mean, it's ridiculous. And we know that, as I've said many, many times, that the best effort of a scoundrel is an insult. And we should just learn that and continue our march in history. Because if you give in to those labels, you are allowing yourself to be silenced, because this is the intention, is to make you so afraid of this label that you actually decide, I can't speak, because if I speak, I confirm the label. Remember what your objective is. It is freedom and justice for the people of Palestine. In conclusion, I'm not, familiar with all these social media, but I've been reading some of the commentary, and I just want to reiterate the point that there isn't a hatred of Jewish people. We're not racist. We're not promoting hatred. What the struggle is about is the colonized people of Palestine who have been occupied for over 75 years and who, like every human being, are deserving of freedom. It's not about hating anyone, and I think we should not use language that suggests that we are promoting an agenda of hatred. We are promoting an agenda of freedom, an agenda of justice, and we must stress this everywhere where we are organizing and carrying out our activities.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pandor. I think that's such a beautiful moment to conclude with. But before we do, let me just agree with you, and also just to kind of endorse this. One of the things that I also do is organize with South African Jews for a Free Palestine. I am Jewish. I come from people some of whom fled the Nazi Holocaust in Europe and settled or became part of a Jewish diaspora, which is how Jews have been for millennia in South Africa, and some of whom were in the Warsaw Ghetto, who were also called terrorists, in fact, for standing up to colonial fascists. So I just want to really endorse this and really to say that there is, for me, the most Jewish thing I can say is I'm an anti-Zionist. For me, the most Jewish thing I can say is I refuse to be constrained by a white supremacist state, that I want to see a free Palestine from the river to the sea. My Jewish practice is grounded in a diasporic sense of that. And so I think, much like the term terrorist, it's increasingly scary because with the rise of global fascism and white supremacy, we are seeing equally huge rises in legitimate anti-Semitism, which is terrifying. And that is what I'd call Judeophobia, rather. But the ways that this is being used to mean any criticism of Israel is coming around to the argument to say that genocide and Holocausts are Jewish, and that it is anti-Semitic to criticize mass murder and genocide. So I think I just would really endorse that point, that Zionism is itself deeply anti-Semitic, and that Judaism is a liberatory faith, culture, and practice, even if it's practiced secularly or whatever. So yeah, I wanted to say that we have. I'm so glad we've got a Kiswa bag.
Yes, but I can't see myself. So let me do the camera.
Do the camera. Do the camera.
Yes, I've done the
Welcome
camera.
back.
I think I have.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Do you want to tell us anything, or do you want me to ask you a question? Because I have one question for you before we close.
No,
do you want
no.
to tell us about your adventure offline?
I had actually added something in the comments, and I wanted to highlight to everybody who's watching, not just from everybody from the global south, but everybody from the world as well.
Oh, I think we've lost this amazing Zukiswa on the boat. What I do want to say, which I know that I don't know if she's gonna come back, but I don't want to. Just in the meantime, I want to just make this point that Zukisa always urges us to make, and then I'm gonna, is that all of our, and I said it at the beginning, and she said it at the beginning, that all of these struggles are connected, and unfortunately, the oppressors are deeply, deeply able to bypass really, really weird lines. So they will, provided they have a shared goal. And that I think it's very important, as we are focused on the flotilla, we are focused on Gaza because that is why we're doing this. But as we are focused on Palestine, and as we are focused on Palestine, we are focused on the series of connected genocides and holocausts that are happening globally in the DRC, in Sudan. When we're talking about Tigray, when we're talking about spaces of settler colonialism, and we're looking at globophobia, what's happening in India, and we're seeing this groundswell of popular resistance. I think to keep in our consciousness how these struggles are connected, and also how forms of racism, forms of class inequality, forms of sexism, forms of queerphobia, forms of religious discrimination are also all connected. And so I think I'm not saying it as well as Zukiswa often does, but I suggest, without speaking for her, really just bring this point in closing, and maybe we can close here, unless you have anything you'd want to come in with, Dr. Pando, but just to say, as all our forms of oppression are connected, so too are all our struggles.
No, I agree with you fully, and I think as we observe the United Nations General Assembly meeting, we can really see that the United Nations has been diminished in its ability to respond to all these crises, all these prejudices, all this conflict. And so as we work on the current campaign against war, we should also work toward building a stronger United Nations with the capability in future to protect people. We haven't focused on that sufficiently. So as civil society, let's not neglect the critical importance of United Nations reform to ensure that when we say never again, we have the enforcement ability to ensure that we can protect people who are facing terrible threats.
I think what a point to end on. I think let's work towards a regime, a place of human rights where human means all humans, not only certain humans who fit into privileged categories. I'm going to leave us on this very powerful note. Think about what has been especially pushed by the Colombian delegation at the UN here as well, in terms of uniting and the success, and what we might think of around thinking about what a decolonized or reformed United Nations that is not just a relic of a post-World War II order that preceded formal decolonization in a lot of ways. So let's think of this. Before I close, just a huge thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you to Dr. Pando. Thank you to Zukiswa, and thank you especially to the wonderful folks. I've been loving watching these comments happen. I'm very glad if I can say that Dr. Pando's first Instagram Live was with the Global Samud Flotilla and with all these wonderful people that have shared of their brilliance, of their humanity, of their vulnerability, and of their strength. And let us go into the evening or whatever time it is with the spirit of Samud, of steadfastness, and with our eyes on Palestine, towards a free Palestine in our lifetime, from the river to the sea. Thank you, everyone. Good night.